Okay, here we go.
Okay. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
It's been a long time.
And a strange time because we make this book all along, all this personal conversation, almost therapeutical conversation, just the two of us in a room, and I'm like the shrink making you talk, and then it goes all into the audience, and I've been watching your promotion tour, very long one, and I was wondering how do you feel when you begin to realize that all these things that were said into a room are suddenly in the headlines of the on the newspapers or on the TV, and if it feels the same, or maybe a bit awkward.
It doesn't feel awkward. I mean, first of all, it's good to see you again. I mean, Santiago and I worked together for almost, it seems like it's been a little bit over 2 years since we began our conversation
From
about
the first interview?
Yeah, our first interview, and the idea that that I was having this incredible experience in Spain, and the relationship between the United States and Spain that I wanted to talk about in an intimate way. So the journey, began, quite innocently, and as we started talking and sharing my thoughts and really my whole life story as it unfolded was, I think you said, a little bit like therapy, to really share it, because you don't think about it, you don't really understand as you go through your life. Every person that you meet, every relationship that you have, somehow, is in the back of your mind, and they do play a part in your future. And I think that when I arrived here in an official capacity, I was able to call upon all those relationships, and you helped to elicit that from me. And also, I think the most important part was to feel vulnerable in the journey that I took. Because I think originally when we started to tell the story, I was highlighting, I think, everything that most people knew. And then I realized that we needed to pull the curtain of diplomacy back a little bit and take a look inside and share my personal journey and my anxiety, my emotion, my personal vulnerability along the way. And I just say thank you for helping me take that leap, because it's something that I'd never done before.
Thank you. You were surprisingly open. I thought it was maybe because you were American. You are American. Working with, the first time we meet was an interview for Vanity Fair. And for Vanity Fair, I can feel the difference among Americans and Europeans. Europeans have a very big gap between the private life and the public life. And Americans tend to think that an individual is just an individual, so they value, even for politicians, private life, which is very strange in Europe. So I found you very, very open, very able to talk about in the very personal stuff, which is in the book, and which is I appreciate, because I was very scared you wouldn't. When the publisher told me, James Costos wants you to make this book, I remember our first interview, and you were still the ambassador. And you were so silent. There were many interesting questions about the spying scandal that you had to manage just when I arrived between the United States and Spain, about being gay, which is a part of your politics and Obama's politics. And I made you this interview, and it was you and Michael. And Michael was not the ambassador, so he could speak. And it was such a relief when Michael would say, okay, we speak freely because you were prudent. Is that very diplomatic?
Reserved.
And reserved.
Yes.
And I said, okay.
Diplomatic, maybe, is the right word.
In Spanish, it's very diplomatic. And I said to the publisher, okay, I'm doing this, but he must talk. And I'm going to make all questions, even uncomfortable questions. And if we begin to say, I cannot answer this, there is no book at all. But you were surprisingly free all along the process of the book. And that's what I wanted to ask you. Did you feel somehow free after leaving the embassy? Did you have the feeling that you could be more of yourself now that you are not the representative of the United States of America?
I'm not sure that I would say that there was this release or this sort of freedom that I had, but what I think was important along the journey was that all the stories that you'll read in the book eventually are stories that were very public. There are no secrets in the book, really. I mean, there are things that happened. Everything that I did as an official is on the record. There are no secrets. But a lot of people...
Well, we'll talk about that now.
There are a lot of people who just weren't privy to the access that we wanted to give. We talk a lot in the book that President Obama and the First Lady, their policy right from the beginning was to open the White House, was to welcome all levels of society and not just the top of the pyramid, as we talk about in the book, but every single level. And we wanted to do that, and we wanted to give people an opportunity to see the work that we did. But not everybody got that opportunity. I mean, as much as we tried with, the big events, at Conde Duque with 5,000 people, as we say, events with a purpose or parties with a purpose that we hosted at the embassy, we couldn't get everyone in Spain to join us. So I wanted to tell the story to as many people by writing this book. So, the work of an embassy is tedious. The day-to-day operation that my team and the people that work there with on the bilateral relationship with their Spanish counterparts is a lot of tedious work. It doesn't necessarily deserve the news, but we wanted to celebrate those successes by having these great events and bringing people together. And this book is about giving that access and peeling that curtain back and sharing a little bit of the process of how we got to some of these successes.
Let's begin by the beginning. Probably many people here knows because there is many people here which is in the book, and for the first time I know them by face. But many people still doesn't know just the first question. Why you and why Spain? Why exactly you and Spain? Why are you appointed by Obama to Spain?
We talk in the book a lot about the process of how a U.S. ambassador is appointed to a country, and once again, it's a very technical process. I mean, we have over 200 embassies around the world, and there are many career diplomats who fill those positions. There's roughly 30% or 25%, depending on the president, who picks a personal representative to take the responsibility to represent him and our country in a post where the president chooses. I, had a pre-existing relationship with the president. It was unexpected that I would ever be asked to take this job, which we talk a lot about in the book, and the vulnerabilities of how anxious that made me to take this responsibility and try to fulfill it. But it's the president's choice at the end of the day. So his decision is his and his staff. But we had a little bit of influence because of my love for this country. Michael and I had been traveling here for almost 17 years when we first arrived in Mallorca and spending our holidays, but had never visited the capital.
You had never been in Madrid?
I'd never been in Madrid
17
before.
times in Spain, never in Madrid.
Yeah,
Okay.
17 years, not times. But we had never been to the capital. We had been to other places around the country. So we had to, let the president know subtly that Spain was of interest to us, and eventually I think he got the message. And we talk about that chapter in the book when he called and mentioned his intention, but still didn't quite know where until we had a lot of offline conversations with his team. And I was incredibly fortunate to land in Spain, in a country which is an incredible ally to the United States, which we discuss a lot in the book, the importance of those relationships. And that really is, I think the central theme of the book, which is relationships, that you're not able to actually get the best, I think, if you don't have a built-in relationship, that you work hard to create this relationship. And I think that we tried to do that. And we had success. And when the hard things happen, it's easier to have a pre-existing relationship with people before you have to actually deal with the trouble in personal relationships as well.
And how about your personal, how would this change your personal relationship with Michael? You had a life in California. That was, I know many partners of diplomatics, and I guess it's the worst thing you can be in life because you are forced to move with somebody. You're part of somebody else's life. Mm-hmm. How you plan this?
Well, you don't. Because things happen and you have to just go with it. A partner is your partner in everything. And Michael, of course, as I'm sure many people in this room know, an incredible component and a partner of the work that we did. He wasn't with me a lot of the time. We had a lot of personal struggles along the way, which we talk in the book, and difficulties in trying to maintain a long-distance relationship because, as you know, he didn't live here full-time and was traveling back and forth. But we make it work. This is service to your country, and this is service to, as I said earlier, a great relationship with an ally. So in a country we had really loved before. So it was easy, but difficult on us. And when it ended, there's a beginning and an end to these things. So it's going to end, and you're going to go back to your normal life and pick up where you left off with a lot of other great things along the way that you brought into it. So that's where we are today.
When is the first time I saw you? I'm going to ask you a question I never did to you. The first time I saw you, you had just arrived to Madrid. I knew vaguely there was a new ambassador. But suddenly it was in the news, all this Snowden case and the suspicious of spying from the United States and Europe and all these tense international moments. And you were called to the Santa Cruz Palace, to the foreign minister. And when you went out, still images are in YouTube, I'm sure. When you went out, all the cameras were there, and I was in front of TV, and when the ambassador of the United States comes out, I say, "That's the ambassador? God, he's handsome." And the second thing I realize is he smiling? You were smiling somehow when you got into the car. I never asked you, what were you thinking about when you went out from this very tense moment for the bilateral relationship, and you go out from this place? I thought you might be thinking, am I sure I want to do this? It was like you had just arrived. You were 1 month here.
Yeah, less than a month.
And suddenly you have what was going to be the worst crisis because it was the most tense moment, just at the beginning.
Sure. A lot of diplomacy and the work that you do, you have to inspire a sense of confidence, right? You have to show, the fact that you believe in what you are doing, that you have to show this faith, in the news. I mean, so, coming out of the palace is one thing, and that's literally 30 seconds of, from the front door to the car, but you're sweating the entire time. I mean, it's not easy, and I'm not going to pretend that's what, is what's going on, but you are trying to show that the relationship is strong, regardless of what's happening in the media, because I think, as we know today, there's so much news that exists that we're reading, we have to process, we have to interpret. Photographs are part of that. But for me, it was really coming out of there and trying to say through a photograph that the relationship was strong, that we weren't going to let Snowden or an NSA issue or these WikiLeaks, these things that were coming out, get in the way of the relationship. We need to actually show strength to the people who are in this country, to the Americans, because that news, those photographs went around the world, and we needed to show the strength, and I think that was it. But so, it's no secret though, when you get in the car, you've got a lot of work that still needs to be done. So we went through this process, and at the end, we came out okay. So, and this is the thing that we don't talk about, in the book, but the diplomatic conversations, the negotiations, the relationships that, obviously, of course, even pre-existed me. I can't take credit for everything that happened before me. There have been many ambassadors that have had this incredible post, that have worked hard to build those relationships, and you jump in and you do the best you can. So that's what we did.
But you have a different style, and so I wanted to ask you about what was the reaction when suddenly you come with this Obama's inspired policy of connecting people and opening the embassy to the whole society and inviting artists and entrepreneurs and new young people and having the Marines dancing with Alaska, which is a famous picture. And there must have been a resistance. This is not what ambassadors usually do, was it? Inside the embassy and outside the embassy.
No, absolutely. I think that, we like to say, it was modern diplomacy, right? That we were trying to do something under President Obama, who had given us this this approval, in a sense, to do it your way. I mean, he has the policies. Our job is to talk about them, is to deliver them, is to and I hate to use the word promote them, because with Spain as an incredible ally, our relationships are so strong. Like there's no gap between what Spain and the United States believe in as you talk about safety and security, anti-terrorism protection, what's happening in the Middle East and Africa, commercial relationships that we have, trade, our belief in NATO. These are things that existed and that we share, as a common belief for the most part. And obviously there's a room between that, but it's close. So when the president, says, okay, go, and particularly President Obama, who said, you have my policies, but how you talk about them in Spain, how you create the relationships is up to you. So it's the most entrepreneurial job that I had ever had. And he gave me the authority to do it the way that he thought that I would be best at doing it. So, we're not, there's some innuendo or some subtleties of how you can change people's opinions, but it's soft diplomacy. And what I would say, it's old school diplomacy. It's the way things always used to be done. But, things have changed so much. People got more protective. People got more reserved, I think, in the way that they did things. And Obama wanted to make sure that we broke a lot of these barriers down. It was about transparency, it was about inclusion, it was about really connecting people. And you know, of course, we talk about this because you inspired me to talk about how I received a lot of criticism from people who hadn't done that in a long time. And it was really about communicating to people what the strategy was. I didn't think I needed to. I thought that people would understand it when they saw it unfolding. But then things sort of spiraled and things were appearing in the press. My own team at some times, you know, not all of them, but some of them didn't quite believe in or understand what I was doing. So I had to explain it. And some of them, of course, jumped on board. You know, some people, you know, may have a different understanding of the way they want things done, but when you're the ambassador, you have the authority to do it your way and promote it your way.
Another your way moment is Zapateros coming back to the embassy back then to raise the gay flag in a very special day. It was after the Supreme Court in America accepted the gay marriage in practice. So you invite the president who had legalized gay marriage, but it was a polemical precedent for the Department of State. He had not the best relationship with America since the Iraq War. So I guess that may have also urged people, maybe inside or outside the embassy.
Yeah.
It was easy to take that decision?
It was. I mean, you know, once again, I think that there are people who, the State Department is anti-controversial. You know, things are better left not sort of bridged rather than trying to break or change things. I mean, if you create the least path of resistance is the best way. But magic doesn't happen. Things don't happen if you don't bring people together. And of course, I understood the past of you know what you just said, but the point was we were celebrating a specific moment, an accomplishment that Zapatero had brought to Spain with marriage equality, and our country 8 years later, or 10 years later actually, was finally there. And I wanted to bring the person who was responsible for that to the embassy. And the chapter in the book, I think, is quite emotional because of what happened and the remarks that came out of that speech that day. And
your personal life, because this was a very personal issue for you. I mean, you were making policies which were very personal and close and important to you.
Well, I mean, listen, it's the policies of our country. They personally affected me. I was incredibly proud, but I think that, you know, I would jump ahead to today and say that when we made those speeches that day and we congratulated Spain for having marriage equality for 10 years and the fact that America was finally joining them and our Supreme Court had made it the law of the land, the next day we all woke up and we said, but we still have to continue to fight. That, you know, that there is always going to be someone who is going to try to roll back the progressive agenda that we work on across the board. And it's not just LGBT rights, it's women's issues, it's human rights issues, it's things that you see. And we're seeing that even today. I mean, that there is a new administration that is rolling back, you know, rights and privileges that we fought very hard for. And you just have to continue to fight. And I think you can be negative on these things, but you can also be optimistic and understand that you have to be active. You have to always continue to be involved. I mean, civic engagement is the most critical thing in our country, and we're seeing that as we go into the midterm elections in November and the presidential elections in 2020. People need to not complain, they need to vote. And this is how we can affect change. So we have to be active, and it's about civic engagement.
Have you received any feedback from Zapatero from the book?
I haven't, no. I haven't received any feedback yet from people who are...
Not from Pablo Iglesias? Not from
No one, nobody yet. Everybody's acting...
Not from Margallo. Margallo, I'm waiting for Margallo.
You know, exactly. We talk about him in the book as well. You know, it's only been a few days, you know, since we've published. There's been a lot of publicity on the book, and I think that it's you know, hopefully being well received. I mean, I think that, as I said before, was really just an opportunity to share the process that we went through and to inspire people that, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, it's my biography. It's not really about being an ambassador. I mean, Spain, as I said, is the central figure, but it's a life story. And the unlikely story that I would end up as a U.S. ambassador in Spain, coming from a small town, from immigrant grandparents who had parents who worked, you know, in the lower middle class and really aspired to have an American dream.
In fact, you are. Mm-hmm. You are the grandson of Greek immigrants, mm-hmm. the son of a Marine, and you become ambassador of the States. You are also a bit of the story of the business in the United States. In fact, you were a bit guilty of the crisis because you were hiring executives for the banking, didn't you?
Well, that was a long time ago. Don't hold me responsible for the financial crisis in America.
But you were in the around the banking, about the luxury business, about around the Hollywood business, about very emblematic business of the United States. Mm-hmm. And you were also making connections from American business to Spain, say Google Campus or Netflix or HBO open in that time. What importance you give to business, to the mutual relationship? Well,
I mean, as you said, you know, I arrived in Spain in 2013. It was really the height, you know, sort of, and almost the end of the crisis. There was beginning to be some light. It had been 9 or 10 consecutive quarters of negative growth in Spain. I arrived at a time where we could use, you know, or I could put to work my relationships in the business community. You never take any credit for any of that. I mean, all I did was try to introduce people to this country, to what it had to offer. And those relationships develop between the principals. You know, we just, you know, make the connection. So it was easy because, you know, Spain is an incredible country. It had built an incredible infrastructure. It was prepared for the future. And there were issues that I think American investors could help make some impact. And the thing that was most interesting to me was working with the entrepreneurs and connecting with young people who had asked me to support them, to try to make connections. Where big business is always easier, you know, government is always easy, but you know, the entrepreneurs are the ones that needed, I think, a lot more support. And it was really fantastic to meet them, and they inspired me. And so we made some great connections there too. And hopefully, you know, we see some of the results today.
Why, to finish about your time in the embassy and move forward, you used Hollywood and painting. Hollywood artists in parties, Harrison Ford or Sarah Jessica Parker were at your residence. How this is important? How is this useful to diplomacy? Having Hollywood artists, having paintings in the residence, having all this culture.
I mean, it goes back to what I said before, is that you can use those opportunities to highlight the successes, to call attention to the things that you've done. As I said, the work, you know, that a lot of my team is here tonight, and the things that we did, you know, are not, they're not newsworthy, and you can't talk about them. So, you know, having the ability to bring an artist, a high-profile celebrity, a big business leader who's been working in Spain, you know, at different levels, but to have them come creates, it's like the cherry on the ice cream cone, right? It's what really attracts the media, the publicity. It brings the attention to the work that everybody does every day. And that sometimes, just as far as I understood, wasn't really being celebrated. So it's about celebration. You can't do all the work and never have a party or celebrate the work that people do every day. So that was why it was so important. And those are why those relationships matter so much. I mean, they're highlighted in the media, but the end result of having them come and the connectivity and the attention that those companies bring and the investments they brought and the businesses that are now here because of that is the result. So that's why you do those kinds of things.
When you finished, well, you finish as a political ambassador, you finish when Obama's term finishes. So when President Obama leaves the White House, he goes to your house. And you had there in Palm Springs this, I would say, historical opportunity to see a man leaving White House after 8 years in a moment when everything is about to change, and this is not a normal president coming in. It's not like the usual Democratic-Republican alternates. How was in these first days Obama? Was he relieved after 8 years and free? Was he worried about Donald Trump in the White House? Was he just not thinking about what is this crucial moment for the president?
I don't think that anyone realized how chaotic, that Washington is or how it would turn. Of course, it wasn't what a lot of people had expected. I mean, I thought, and most people, I think, would agree that we thought that it would have a different outcome. So when it happened, it happens. I mean, and this is the American people voted. They get the leader they elected, and this is what happened. So, we had a great journey. I mean, we had a few days together to take, the same for me because I had left my post as well and was, returning back to private life. Of course, I can't make any comparison to my journey versus president, but it is very similar in terms of service that you're finally waking up the next day and, he still has a little bit of a protocol around him with security, and Michael and I were kind of free of having a security detail and a protocol, and we could do the things we wanted. But I think it was really important for them as a family to focus on family, that they did when they were in the White House. It was important. I think Obama got criticized, of course, as every president does, but he was focused on his family, that his kids were young. He would go home every night and have dinner, but would go to work afterwards. But for them, they wanted to maintain the fact that they were tenants at the White House. I mean, President Obama talked about it, that it wasn't his house, that he was there for a certain period of time. There was a beginning and an end. As I said, for Michael and I at the embassy, there was a beginning and an end, and you have to be prepared for that. So, it was actually kind of seamless. I think when you're prepared for these kinds of changes, it's life-changing, but it's not catastrophic.
Mm-hmm. He was in the last months, in a very untraditional way for an ex-president, very critical to Trump because we are facing a midterm election in 1 month or so.
Less than a month.
So he's been more active than usually for an ex-president, and everything is very strange for this moment elections. How do you feel American society will act this time? What do you expect? What do you think could happen?
It's hard to make any predictions in these things. I mean, I think that President Obama was very respectful, as every president has always been, of the new incoming president. He didn't get in the way of the new administration. He, of course, welcomed Donald Trump into the White House after the election and provided as much support for a transition And, over the course of the last year and a half, the Obamas have been building their foundation, building their presidential center, to continue to work on a lot of the initiatives that they did when they were in the White House, and also trying to engage the next generation of leaders, but also people to be engaged in their own democracy, to speak up, to use their voices, to vote. So, they're working really before they left the White House on those same initiatives, things that are related to the environment, women and girls education, technology, and the civic engagement. So that's where they are. And of course, now we're coming up to an election, and we have a critical election at hand in the midterms. We've just seen a Supreme Court justice be appointed. So, the Republicans now have control of the White House. They have the Congress, the House and the Senate, and a majority now in the justice. So the midterm elections you will see the tone of the country, I think, at this point. You will see if people will be moved to vote for their, to make change. As Obama says, don't boo, vote. You can't complain if you don't take a position.
It's LGBT community moved to vote?
I think it's not just, LGBT community is under attack. Women are under attack. The gun issue is a big deal. I think that you see that the shooting that happened in Florida, the Parkland shooting in Miami, there are 4 million teenagers that will turn 18 before November happens that will be able to vote. A lot of the students who are in the gun issue, most of these issues, most of the shootings that have ever happened at a grade school. So they weren't of an age to vote. These teenagers, or it was a high school, and they will be of age to vote, and they're active. And any movement that's ever happened, from the right for women to vote, for the LGBT movement, for human rights issues, or activation, or young people who are out in the streets, who are demonstrating, who are really doing a call to action. So, I'm inspired by these young people. This is, really, I think, where the difference can be made. I'm not sure where they'll vote, but, I think that, as we say, most people, the Democratic Party is bigger and more active, and if we vote, we win. It is my party. I'm not, I don't want to be political tonight, but if the Democrats will show up at the polls, they will have an opportunity to take back the Congress, maybe the House, and maybe the Senate. But I don't have a crystal ball. I can't say. But I think that there's a lot of activation going now in the country, and you just have to turn on the news and see it. It's happening.
Let's finish talking about Spain. You were in a very critical moment because you find an old king and you saw coming the new king, all during your tenure. What relevance you said it has to this country, this change of king? Well,
listen, I was at a point to be at the seat of history. To see these changes happening, which were unexpected. We see, of course, the abdication of King Juan Carlos, of course, the introduction of King Felipe as a young modern monarch. You see the changes in presidency just recently, and how strong the institutions are in Spain, that regardless of where you sit, or what you believe in, the democracy in this country is strong. The institutions are strong. I'm not blind to the fact that there are issues that exist, as they do in every country in mine. But I would say, if I had to compare, the chaos in my country is much greater than what I see in Spain. And I think that the recent visit of Pedro Sanchez to the United States, was a great visit. I mean, he visited the UN, he made a speech, he met with American investors in New York, he went to California and met with entrepreneurs, the mayor, the governor. Those are strategic and important visual moves. He came home and announced that Spain was the next startup nation. That is attractive. I mean, words matter, and action, of course, hopefully follows. So we'll see what happens. But I would say that it's great to see this democracy, which is very young, moving forward without, I think, the chaos that you would compare in my country, which we had never expected. And it's, I'm reluctant to make a statement, but I think that what's happening in my country is dangerous because of how divisive it is. And I see a little bit of a difference here in Spain.
Former Minister Margallo thought you were a Catalan independentist.
Well,
have you changed from that?
Well, he was mistaken, of course. And no, I mean, listen, I think that this is what diplomacy is about, right? I mean, sometimes, as I said, words matter. Words can be misinterpreted sometimes, and you need to correct them if you made a mistake. But, listen, I have great respect for the foreign minister when I worked with him. He wanted the best for his country, and I think that we accomplished a lot together. It didn't get in the way, as we talk about in the book, his love for his country and mine, or mine with his. So that's what happens.
Last question is, what do you think is the biggest, you know this country very well, and you know at very different positions, that's what you have done when you were an ambassador. So what do you think is its main challenge? What it should face for the next years, for the future? What would you consider?
Well, I think the path is great. I mean, the trajectory is amazing. In my time, I saw, as I said before, incredible changes that happened. I saw them happen, in a very sort of, I wouldn't say, a controlled way, but I saw things move forward without a lot of chaos, at least from the outside. And I think that, there's positive results that are happening. The economy is doing better, jobs are coming back. There's always more work to do, and we can always be critical of people's decisions of how they're approaching that. But it is a positive outlook. I think if you look at the rest of Europe, I always say Spain is an example for Europe in terms of where it is today and where it was when I arrived in 2013. For me, I just say on a personal note, I come back to Spain, often with Michael. I have some work here now with some multi-international clients, Spanish and U.S. multinationals, that keep me connected. And there's a great interest in Spain. It's an attractive country, and I'm really happy to continue my relationship as non-official, as a private citizen, and really, as we talk about in the book, to turn those official relationships into friendships, and to continue to support this country as a private citizen, as President Obama and the First Lady are doing around the world where they are. So,
and let me tell you, I think that one of the things I like more about your story and about your book, about your view, is the fact that usually we see lots of people cutting ties between people, building walls between people, and I guess your view, your personal story, and this book is a perfect example of how you can make people talk, which is something we really need very much in Spain, in Europe, and everywhere. So I want to say thank you for that. Thank you for your story and your openness. And I want to give you an applause.
Thanks for taking the journey with me.
Thank you.